Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, it's another one of these Sunday school remix episodes. I'm having a lot of fun putting these together. I hope you're enjoying them. Today, we're talking about the feeding of the 5,000. You can find it in literally every gospel. But what have we been taught about it, and what is actually there in the text, and how might we think about this differently? Looking forward to this one. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good. Ah, yes. The feeding of the 5,000. It is perhaps Jesus's most famous miracle because we love to eat. I don't know if that's the reason. I think it might be the most famous because it is the only miracle that appears in all four gospels. I guess the resurrection also technically appears in all four gospels, but not really in Mark. That's a longer story for another podcast. But we hear this story a lot, and it's amazing. There were thousands and thousands of people on the hillside. One fun detail, just to start you off, is it tells us that there were 5,000 people, not including women and children. So there were even more than 5,000 people likely fed during this miracle moment. And it's interesting that all four gospel writers take the time to describe this event. Clearly, this is something that people knew about, that Jesus had gained notoriety for, a story that had been passed down in a variety of different communities. And so there's something incredibly significant about it. And you think in those days when food insecurity was even more paramount and prominent than it is for us today, that, yeah, this story would gain you a lot of notoriety amongst the masses. And so, yeah, the way that the story goes is that Jesus was teaching and then people were getting hungry. And I love it. In John's gospel, John chapter 6, his version of the story, the disciples come to Jesus and they're like, hey, Jesus, like there's a lot of people here and they're getting kind of hangry. Like, what should we do? And Jesus says, why don't you get them something to eat? Which is a really significant phrase. And we're going to see why as we make our way through this story, how important that sassy line from Jesus really is to, at least the way that I'm proposing this story could be read. And so the disciples, are kind of looking around like, well, we've got a few loaves and fishes here. Let's see what we can do with it. And there's another small detail that, again, we gloss over and never talk about. We tend to just focus on like, yeah, Jesus had just a little bit of bread and a few fish and somehow managed to multiply it and feed thousands of people with just a very, very small amount of food. But in John's gospel, when this story is described, it tells us that Jesus, after kind of receiving this food from the disciples, he broke the group, the thousands of people gathered there, into smaller gatherings of 50 or 100. This is a really interesting point that I'm guessing many of you weren't even aware that was in the scriptures, because it's not something we ever talk about. But yeah, before blessing the bread and the fish, before breaking it up and distributing it, Jesus first said like, hey, you guys just get in little communities here and here and here and here and here. And then Jesus blesses and breaks and takes the food with the help of the disciples out to all the people who are there. And there's a lot of debate amongst scholars. It's really interesting. I know I had a pastor once who was really insistent that we need to think about this story as something miraculous that Jesus did. He is the Son of God. He is able to just multiply food, and that's incredible. And that's because Jesus is God in human form. And I understand why people want to insist on that point. We don't want to take anything away from Jesus or try to diminish his power, capabilities, etc. For a lot of people, that's just a very important part of their faith, is to know that Jesus has capabilities and abilities beyond our own human abilities. And so, yes, he can walk on water and he can cure the sick and make the lame walk and feed 5,000 people with just a little bit of food. Because what does that tell us? It points us to understand that God is the one who gives, that God is the one who creates, that all that we have been given is a gift from God that miraculously arrives before us. I think that's a really good reading. And I'm guessing that's more or less how we understood and interpreted this story in Sunday school. This is a Sunday school remix episode after all. And so we need to start by just talking about the normal way that we think about this story. But I want to propose to you another piece of the puzzle here. And what I like about this other interpretation of this famous story is that I feel like it better aligns with the other aspects of Jesus's message and his ministry, and it pulls together some of these strange details that the Bible gives us and helps us kind of understand why they were included. So Jesus breaks this group, the people, as I said, into small little communities. And then he takes bread and he blesses it and he breaks it and he distributes it. And what if the real miracle here is a miracle of generosity? It's a miracle of a shift in people's hearts. Because in those days, you wouldn't head out to go hear the famous speaker or rabbi without, throwing a little bit of food in your knapsack, not knowing when you would return home or when you would get hungry. And so when the people saw Jesus sharing this little bit of bread and fish in his own way, did they then go into their knapsacks and start to share the little bit that they had with them? And did these little communities start to just share amongst themselves? Like, yeah, no one person could feed 5,000, but with their little bit in their knapsack and a little bit in his, yeah, this whole community of 50 or so could be easily fed. And you come back to that phrase that I was telling you about earlier, where Jesus says, why don't you give them something to eat? Is that really the message here? Is that the message that the people internalized? Is that the miracle that people heard this and took hold of it and put it immediately into practice? You see, all of Jesus's ministry seems to center around this idea of teaching us how to love one another. Yeah, he said that a couple of times in various and different places, that this is the new commandment he's giving us. Love one another as I have loved you. And isn't that exactly what we see modeled in the feeding of the 5,000? Jesus loves them enough to share and distribute the small amount of bread and fish he could find. And so then they learn to love one another in this same way. As we move forward and come to the holiday of Thanksgiving coming up later this week, I'm really struck by this message and what it could mean for us today. Is the real miracle allowing our hearts to be changed by Jesus's generosity, by the blessings we've received, in order that we then can start to make a difference with the small amount that we have in the communities around us? Do you see how all these little pieces start to fit together? Yeah, maybe you on your own can't go out and feed 5,000 people this Thanksgiving, but can you share a little bit of what you've been given? And if we all share just a little bit and allow our hearts to be changed by what we have been blessed with already, won't that inherently start to bring about God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven? This is how I see and read this feeding of the 5,000 story. It's a miracle of generosity and a miracle of heart change. I learned recently that the word Thanksgiving, we've got this big Thanksgiving holiday coming up. The word Thanksgiving, in particular in an Old Testament Hebrew Bible mindset, when one would give thanks, there was an act of lifting one's hands up. And we still kind of do that in church from time to time. Maybe at your church, when you bring the offering forward in the offering plate, you see someone lift it up. Or when I preside at communion and bless the bread and the wine, I always lift it up. Well, the idea is that we are giving back to God what God has first given to us. Giving back what we've first been given. That has always been the movement and the dynamics of our life of faith. God blesses us first, and then we respond with good deeds and acts of kindness and care towards others. We are given something first, and we lift it up and give it back to God in the ways that we perpetuate and bring forward God's message of love, care, compassion. This seems to me to really be the heart of the entire gospel message. And we see it in the feeding of the 5,000. And so as we head into this Thanksgiving holiday, take time to give thanks and to recognize the gifts that you have been given, and to just simply appreciate all that's around you. But then also take time to think about how you can share those gifts with others. Another thing that I learned recently is that the act of generosity is really good for your heart and your brain and your nervous system. You've probably seen or heard things about that before, that a gratitude practice is really a great thing for your own mental and physical health. But what I learned is the particular kind of gratitude practice that is most effective to the body's systems. Apparently, the most effective way of practicing gratitude is to think carefully about times when someone expressed gratitude for you. So it's not just listing off like, oh, it's so great that I have a house and a loving family, but it's kind of twisting it and thinking about the ways when you've known that you mattered to somebody else, when you were affirmed at work, when you were given the promotion, when someone really went out of their way to tell you how much you meant to them. That type of gratitude has the most positive effects on our whole system. And so what I hear in this too is that Thanksgiving needs to be about not just giving thanks for what we have, but telling those people in our life what we appreciate about them. Because that is an act of healing. According to neuroscience, that is something incredibly valuable to that other person. When they know that someone is grateful for them, it changes, it heals, it restores and repairs parts of their very bodily system. So it brings in this whole dynamic too. It's not just about giving thanks and appreciating what you have, but it's sharing that gratitude with others. And in the sharing of what we've been given, that is where some real healing can take place in the lives of other people around us. And so I'm marveling at the ways that all of these things fit together, and how it always begins with what we've first been given, but then the real challenge and the goodness for the sake of the world happens when we turn that back around and give it to someone else. So this Thanksgiving, I hope that you can have time to be grateful, but to also tell other people what you appreciate and what you're grateful for about them, that you can share in a really wonderful meal with friends and family, but then maybe also find a time to share from your abundance with those people who are in need around you. And through these practices, through this flow of receiving and then giving, of taking God's love and lifting it up and giving it back to God and back to the world in various ways, we all can do our part in helping bring the kingdom to earth as it is in heaven. There's some thoughts for your Thanksgiving holiday. Thanks for watching, as always. Hey, I really appreciate you. Sincerely, thank you so much for continuing to watch and comment and just participate in this ongoing dialogue through the podcast. As always, friends, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.